Welcome to Preparing for the Unexpected. Today, I want to talk about an article I came across on Insurance Business Magazine from contributor Brian Garlick. Hopefully, I've got the spelling of Brian's name correct here. Entitled Cyber is an Operational Risk, Not Just an IT Issue. And I wanted to talk to someone about that, so I invited back Kip Boyle, who is the CEO at Cyber Risk Opportunities. Kip, welcome back.
Thanks, Alex. I really appreciate the invitation to be here.
It's always a great chat, and you always find the time to provide a lot of great insights. So I thought you'd be perfect to chat with today. So,
Great.
based on the title, the cyber is an operational risk, not just an IT issue. The article goes on to talk about that many companies test their contingency and response plans, but cyber plans are getting tested in isolation. Is that a good idea, a bad idea? What are your thoughts?
Well, okay, first of all, if they're testing their IT plans at all, I don't want to discourage them. So you definitely want to test your IT plans however you do it. I believe that there will be way more business value for testing them in an integrated way because, boy, in my work, I see this all the time where critical business functions that are necessary to sell whatever it is you're selling, collect the money that people owe you, fulfill the order, pay the suppliers that you're working with, right? Those critical functions are relying on software, whether that's software as a service or maybe a bunch of cloud servers that you've spun up, whatever it is. So it just makes sense to me that you would want to test your plans with the people who actually use the systems in question, and that you understand as an IT professional, as a business continuity or disaster recovery professional, that you understand which systems are in fact critical based on the business perspective of what's critical. And then, of course, by doing the practice with those folks that you've identified, it just makes everything easier in a real incident because these are people you may not speak with all the time. Why would you want the first time that you really talk to them to be in the middle of a crisis when the adrenaline is just coursing through our bloodstreams? Like that just doesn't seem like a good setup for success.
Right. During a real incident, the demand for information goes up and the time to actually respond and do anything goes down. So
Right,
you don't want
right,
to all of a sudden turn around and, using us as the example, I've never spoken to Kip before. And then all of a sudden, I'm supposed to be communicating and understand exactly what Kip wants from me. And Kip is supposed to understand everything that he needs from me. And
right,
we've never even met.
right. We've never met, or maybe we know each other's names, but we've never actually made big decisions together. And so you don't know how I think, I don't know how you think, you don't know what I value, I don't know what you value. It's guessing, it's just a bunch of guesswork. Well, let's not do that guesswork in the pinnacle of, a stressful situation where even the best prepared people are going to struggle.
Right. Would you recommend sticking with this first point, testing contingency and response plans? If you are starting out in isolation, using cyber as the example, the next time you do it, bring in another team or two from something else so that you can slowly build up? Or would you recommend, just go for it? Get everybody together and let's just see what happens.
Yeah. Alex, if you've got the kind of working relationship with another team, let's say it's finance, for example, where the two of you, the leader of the cyber team and the leader of the finance team, can just say, "Hey, we're going to do this." Well, that's wonderful, and there's nothing wrong with that. What I notice is that a lot of people in my situation don't have that level of buy-in. Even if they trust each other, it's like, well, I've got all these priorities and you want me to shift some of my time to doing this exercise, which, I kind of like the idea, but my boss expects this and this and this, and we've got month end close and quarter end close, and we're gonna have to close the books soon for the year. And so, as a result of that, what I actually recommend is this is something that has to be from the top down. So this is related to just an overall level of buy-in. And if you can get your senior most decision makers on board with this, then that requirement is going to cascade down through the management hierarchy, and then resources will be allocated. Time can be allocated then, and I just find that works much better.
You mentioned some challenges there, so I'm going to ask, why do some smaller businesses and small, medium-sized business have challenges with creating some of these cyber response plans and programs? You know, what are the challenges they face?
Yeah. Well, and I'm going to answer that question from having had the experience of interacting with those kinds of companies for years and years, and having many of them as current customers of mine. And I would say the biggest differentiator is the person at the top, or the people in the C-suite. They have a lot of risks that they're dealing with. Smaller companies have product market fit. They have intense competition. They have some existential risks that they're having to face and deal with every day. And quite frankly, because cyber isn't something that pops up and nips at you on a daily basis, it can often take a back seat. Now, that's one reason. I want to make sure that I explain a second reason. Sometimes these folks are not what I would call sophisticated risk managers. They are on a happy path in their minds. They're trying to make something happen for their companies. They're looking for business success, and they rarely think about what if something goes wrong. It's just not the headspace that they're in.
Hmm.
And again, I think the mark of a sophisticated risk manager is somebody who at least allocates a little bit of thought time to what if it doesn't go right? What if my great plan doesn't unfold the way that I want it to?
You mentioned headspace there, so I couldn't help but think maybe with small businesses, or actually even some leadership of large businesses, still seem to think that cyber, it's going to happen to somebody else.
Oh,
After all the things
absolutely.
that we've seen, what should we even be hearing that anymore?
Well, yeah, I mean, I still hear it all the time. And I'm going to give you a really simple explanation that I hope will carry through. I had a neighbor about my age. He got shingles one time, and he was telling me all about it. And I said, "What is shingles?" And he said, "Oh, well, I had chicken pox, and now I've got this awful rash, and I can barely sleep." And I thought, "Oh my gosh, I don't want that." I said, so then I started figuring out, well, how can I avoid that? Because I had chicken pox too. Turns out there's a vaccine that you can get that'll help really reduce the risk that you're going to get shingles. So I went and I got that. The only reason I knew that was even a thing for me is that I knew somebody who had it. In other words, I experienced his pain and I went, "Oh my gosh, that could happen to me." And guess what? That same dynamic is in play when it comes to cyber. The people who come to me who are not necessarily sophisticated risk managers typically are people who spoke with a colleague at another firm who had terrible experience with ransomware or something. And so vicariously they said, "I don't want to do that." And then they reach out and they start to do something about it. So, yeah, I think that's just human nature.
Yeah, for the record, I had chicken pox twice, and I do have the vaccine. So
Good
fingers
for
crossed,
you.
no shingles.
Because I have another friend who's got it and it is awful. And I'm like, whew.
Yeah, I've known people who have got it, and yeah, that it's not good. So
Mm-mm.
the next thing I want to ask then is because we kind of hinted at some of these incidents that are out there. Should or at least what are your thoughts on if we should make it public when these cyber incidents occur? Because we find there have been news headlines where an organization had a cyber event and no one hears about it, including those that are on their client lists or vendor lists, find out about it until 6 months later. And then
Or
to the
maybe not
point
at
where
all.
we just talked about, some people who say, oh, it's always happens to someone else. But if we go out of our way to announce these, perhaps the awareness will increase and then
Right.
more will be done. So
I
it's
think
kind
that's
of,
true.
you know,
I think it's a good supposition, but there's no incentive for a victim of a cyber event like we're talking about, there's no incentive naturally to do the kind of disclosure and sharing that you're talking about. So, so we have to ask ourselves, is there a model of how other professionals in other domains do it? And there, it turns out there is. So the National Transportation Safety Board does what I would call a no-fault accident investigation after every major collision, airplane crash, train derailment, what have you, and they publish their findings. Now, this culture of no-fault retrospectives, or there's a lot of different terms you can use, is crucial to allowing that accident investigation to even occur, and then to even publish a report that says, again, in a no-fault way, this is exactly what caused this crash, and here are the things that we can do to prevent this. Because I tell you, in air travel, if we weren't learning from our mistakes, who would trust it? So in cyber, we need something comparable.
That would be a good idea because we only hear about, well, I've heard numbers between, at the most 10% of and less of
That's right.
actual cyber events that occur. But
Yes.
if more and more hear about it, more and more will do something about it. And then we can learn, not just
Yeah.
as an individual organization protecting their realm, but learning as an industry to protect everyone.
Yeah, I think that's right. We also need a systemic mechanism for taking the learnings. Let's say we were able to do NTSB style no fault investigations. We still need mechanisms that would feed back into how we do cyber, how everybody does cyber, so that everybody could avoid having that happen to them. And so that's missing as well. So there's a ton of governance opportunities for us if we would just look at how other industries and areas do things, and then ask ourselves, should we be doing it that way? Um, I think that's really important for us to think about that.
Is there anything like that now, like a cyber organization that is having those thoughts, even if it's just really early? Is there anything that is out there we could point people to maybe get
Hmm.
that ball rolling?
Yeah, well, so there was a time, a couple of 3 years ago, I think it was recent, when the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, right, CISA, which is part of the U.S. federal government, they were actually pursuing exactly this model. And I don't remember what happened, but
Hmm.
they published two reports that I thought were dead on, the kind of thing that we should be doing. But then I believe they lost their funding to continue to do it. So we've had like a, one step forward, one step back, or two steps forward, one step back kind of a thing here. But that's all that I'm aware of.
That would be a great idea because if we
I agree.
if we're doing that for airlines and roads and rail, then let's do it for cyber because that's becoming, so much more invasive in every industry.
Absolutely, it is.
It's not a single thing. So any final thoughts you'd like to share, Kip, uh, on cyber being an operational issue, not just an IT one?
Yeah, just a little thing that I think is important for people to also fold into this topic, which is, and I'm sorry, but I'm gonna have to bring up AI again, but it's really important that we think about that because uh, artificial intelligence is a non-deterministic system or a probabilistic system. And what I'm noticing is that most risk managers are used to dealing with deterministic systems. And let me quickly say what I mean by that. In a deterministic system, you put an input in, you get an output. Same input, same output. In a probabilistic system, these AI ones, you put the same input in, you get a different output every single time, right? There is no input output consistency. That's kind of the nature of the beast there, as you will. And so we need to kind of reprogram ourselves to realize that we can't put the same type of trust in a probabilistic system that we might have placed in a deterministic one. So it's just a new sort of wrinkle that as risk managers and BCDR folks that we need to start, acclimating ourselves to because there's some unique risks that come from putting probabilistic systems into critical business functions.
Right. It's interesting that you mentioned AI because AI is being used to help cyber to start with.
That's right.
You
That's
know, the,
right.
the
Yeah, so it's
criminals,
being
they're using it, the criminals, I should say.
Oh my gosh, right? So we're in kind of a vice here, right? So on the one side, we've got criminals, and in fact, the Five Eyes nations just recently released a note where they said, "Hey, everybody, what we're seeing is a severe uptick in the use of AI by cyber attackers. So, brace yourselves. Here's some things you might want to do to get ready." And then on the other side, we've got our own organizations adopting AI, and then they look at us and say, "You secure it." Or worse yet, they don't even talk to us about it, right?
Yeah.
And then even in our own cyber teams, we're being told, you can't hire anybody else. If you need to do more, you need to bring in some AI to automate some things so that I don't have to increase headcount. So, yeah, this stuff is just proliferating, and we've got it coming at us from all sides.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned on the operational side because, you know, people, analysts, or whoever are using AI to help on their side and without guardrails on what they're inputting into AI could get out into the netherworld there that's opened. You've got criminals over here using AI. It's like we're setting ourselves up sometimes for
It's
something
just,
down the road.
yeah, it's a technological transformation that's affecting everything. It reminds me of, the emergence of mobile computing and, Web 3.0, and I could tick off a number of disruptive technological transformations, and that's what's going on here. And just like at the beginning of all of them, it's messy. It's difficult to understand what's really going on. We don't have a lot of tools. We don't have a lot of proven techniques. We're all scrambling at the same time to try to figure out what does this really mean.
Yeah. Yeah. On that note, we've come to the end of the show. Kip, thank you so much for sharing your time and your thoughts with us today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. Again, super glad to be here.
Welcome back. Kip and I just finished our interview, but while we were chatting post-recording, Kip, you came up with a couple of interesting thoughts that you wanted to add.
Yeah, uh, I realized that one of the impacts of the cyber criminals using artificial intelligence to aid them in their attacks is the speed at which they're going to be attacking us is going to accelerate. And so we need to really think about, well, how is that going to affect us? These cyber defenders. And I believe one of the things that we're going to have to do is get way faster at how we do things like patching for security vulnerabilities. The window between the time that a vulnerability is disclosed and the time that it starts to be exploited by cyber attackers is just getting smaller and smaller and smaller. It's one of the reasons why Mythos 5, the Anthropic large language model, and then Fable 5, which was supposed to have been a guardrailed version of it, they're both offline right now because of concerns about this very issue of the cyber attackers increasing their tempo. Well, sooner or later, those models are going to come back online or things substantially like them. So we have to decide as cybersecurity folks, how are we going to get faster? Because I think speed is the new firewall, and that is just something that I don't believe we're currently doing. I don't think we're currently patching as fast as I foresee that we're going to have to. So I just wanted to make sure that people were beginning to think about this, plan for it. I just didn't want people to be surprised.
Well, I think organizations are going to have to rethink, like I agree with you, rethink their patching windows or operational windows because a lot of times, we have a new patch, it'll be in this window when these systems aren't running and things like that. Well, that could be a week down the road.
Oh,
And I
and
think they're going
sometimes
to have to,
more.
yeah, and I think they're going to have to think saying, we can't wait that.
Yeah.
Operations, you're going to have to rethink something here
Yeah.
because
And
we,
and
to
and
your point, got to do it
specifically,
faster.
Sorry, Alex, but specifically what I think we need to do is we need to take what's the risk of of waiting to patch because we don't want the patch to tip over production machines, and that's real. But do we want that risk or do we want the risk of, well, we took so long to patch that the machines tipped over anyway because they got attacked and were exploited, right? So it's like, okay, which one of these, and maybe there's others, but these two in particular, I know people really pay attention to.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think there might be some tough conversations to come ahead because we know criminals are not going to suddenly get a moral compass and say, okay, yeah, we'll give you time.
No,
You know?
no, no. We'll probably need a lot more redundancy so we can push patches, see what happens, and then push them again. I don't know. There's a lot of ways that we could solve this, but it's just going to require a rethink. I think our tooling's going to have to change. We might have to spend more money on redundant systems.
Yeah,
But hey, let's get ready for that now because it's coming.
yeah. On that note, we've come to the end. Kip, thanks for adding your the last couple of points there. I thought that was quite valuable for everybody. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome.